Hey folks, my name's Charlie, I'm an illustrator, and today I want to talk to you about a problem that every creative problem solver ever has to deal with at some point in their creative career, and that is imposter syndrome. You may have heard of it, you may have experienced it, you may be way too aware of what it feels like. Either way, I hope some of what I talk about today will either help inform you as to what it exactly is, and maybe give you some advice on how to avoid it creeping in and ruining your workflow. But first, I want to talk about the thing that brought me to imposter syndrome, that allowed me to realize what it is and start to analyze it and work out how it comes about and how I can best protect myself and my creativity from it. And it's sketchbooks. So sketchbooks might seem harmless. I mean, they are just paper bound together. You open them, you draw in them. It's a fairly simple process. But for me, for years, especially during my education and for a short while afterwards as well, these were full of pressure and expectations and scary, scary things. Especially a new sketchbook, the first blank page, the next blank page of a sketchbook, anything at all was full of way too many possibilities and way too much pressure. And it made me loathe sketchbooks. It made me not want to use them, made me not want to look at them. It made me think that I hated using sketchbooks, that was just my thing. And especially because there was added pressure from seeing social media posts about people who have these beautiful sketchbooks, that they have tiny ones in every pocket and they sit down for 30 seconds and they draw. Any waking spare moment that they have, they're creating artwork in these wonderful little sketchbooks. And I got so frustrated that I couldn't recreate that. No matter how hard I tried, if I sat down for 30 seconds, I couldn't get my sketchbook out. My brain wasn't in that place. And I couldn't get past the pressure of making every page of my sketchbook perfect. And it's only when I started to analyze what exactly a sketchbook is supposed to do that I was able to move away from that and realize one of the key reasons why I felt the pressure and the negativity around sketchbooks. So I mentioned pressure from social media. So when I looked up sketchbook, when I would look up an example of sketchbook pages and the way other people would use theirs in an effort to try and fix this hatred I had for them, I was confronted with things like this. Just endless swathes of gorgeous, gorgeous sketchbooks. And there's obviously no problem with that. Like, my God, if you've got a stunning sketchbook, post it. Let people see it. But when I was confronted with this, it only added to the pressure because it made me realize, my God, mine will never look this good. No page of my sketchbook looks this good. These are all stunning. And these sketchbooks were exactly that. They were aesthetically pleasing. They were beautiful to look through. They were enjoyable for the viewer. But that's where they fell short of being a sketchbook. The purpose of these sketchbooks that I saw online were to appeal to the viewer, to entertain the viewer. But the purpose of a sketchbook used to the best of its ability, exactly what it's for, is to aid the user, not the viewer. The user is supposed to gain the most out of a well-used sketchbook. And alongside this miscommunication that I had inside my brain, this misalignment of what exactly their purposes were, I realized a huge part of me that was fueling this, a huge part of what every creative person experiences at any given point in their career, it was imposter syndrome. So like I said a minute ago, you may be fully aware of what imposter syndrome feels like, or this might be a completely new term to you entirely. Either way, I've broken down what I'm going to talk about today into 4 little zones. So first of all, I'm going to cover what exactly it is, because if it's new to you, or maybe even if you experience it but you don't know the full depth of what imposter syndrome actually is and where it came from, hopefully that'll help clarify that. Next, we're going to look at what causes imposter syndrome, some things that feed it and make it stronger. After that is who experiences it. And next is how we can start to take steps to shut it down, to reduce its impact that it has on our practice and our well-being. So first thing we're going to look at, like I said, is what exactly is imposter syndrome. So the term was first coined, or more accurately, imposter phenomenon was first coined by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Susan Imes in their amazing article, The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women. This looked specifically at exactly that, high achieving women and the fraudulent feelings that they had when they were in these positions of achievement or success. The two doctors identified 6 key areas that people experiencing or identifying with imposter syndrome would be displaying. And it was these 6. So if any of these you feel like you could tick off, you may well be experiencing it too. First of all is the imposter cycle, which is like a catch-22 cycle where you succeed in something, but then you feel like it was fraud, but then you succeed again, and it just continues on and on and on like that. The need to be special or the very best. Characteristics of a super person, like feeling that you have to be a superhero and different from everybody else. The fear of failure, denial of your ability and discounting any praise that you get, and feeling fear and guilt around your successes. If you feel like you can tick off some, one, all of these, there's a very good chance that imposter syndrome is causing this to happen inside your brain, because very rarely these feelings are based on reality. The feelings of imposter syndrome are incredibly common, like I said at the very beginning, in creative people and problem solvers. The main reason for that being that we deal with not specific right or wrong answers, we deal with the grey area. We deal with this huge realm of possibility and options that are endless, and it's so difficult sometimes to feel like we've chosen the right one. So imposter syndrome creeps in and adds doubt and denial and fear to all of the choices that we make. And it's especially impactful for creative people because we put more of our personality, more of ourselves into the work that we produce than someone who has perhaps a simpler ladder-based career where they can just climb up the ladder and progress and get promotions. Whereas ours feels an awful lot more self-created. I mean, we are self-employed, a lot of us. So it can feel a lot more personal when things start to creep in like doubt and worry. And therefore, imposter syndrome has a great time. So this is present in so many different careers and fields and practices. So there's so many different careers and fields and practices that involve creative problem solving. It isn't just artists. Anyone who deals with options outside of right and wrong, yes and no, black and white, will experience doubt and worry in this horrid grey area that we find ourselves in. And yes, the grey area is full of possibility and fun options, and we can leave the box and experiment with different things, but because it isn't right and wrong, it can be tricky to feel like we've done the right thing for our work. We've done the correct drawing. We've drawn this the right way. So again, rife for imposter syndrome. So in short, imposter syndrome is essentially the feeling as if your successes are a result of luck or fraud rather than your skill and ability. That is all imposter syndrome is. And it isn't a sickness, it isn't an illness, it is just an experience. Like those two incredible doctors at the beginning said, it is a phenomenon. It isn't necessarily something that will stick with you forever. It isn't something you can medicate against. It is a phenomenon. It is an experience. But it can present itself in many, many different ways. It can present itself all the way from doubting and second-guessing things you do every now and then, all the way up to complete work paralysis, like the complete inability to get any work done whatsoever. And then there's everything in between those two options. So it can present itself in many different ways, none of which are pleasant. Some people even find a little bit of drive from imposter syndrome. If it's the lower scale, sometimes doubting yourself and feeling like you could do more does help to drive you create more work. But when it starts to spiral, when it starts to take hold and makes you doubt everything and discount everything that you do, that's when it becomes a problem. So I remember when I delivered this talk initially at a conference, I had someone ask, are there any pros to imposter syndrome? And yeah, like I said, can create a degree of drive inside your brain, but it can also get worse very, very quickly. And then it becomes a hindrance instead of a drive. So now that we know what imposter syndrome is and what it feels like and how it presents itself, we're going to look at the things that will be causing it, things that make imposter syndrome grow faster inside our brains. The first one is quite an obvious one, and it is social media. Now, I am a freelance creative. I need social media to keep my career going. So I'm not going to stand here and say, everyone delete your Twitter accounts, they're really evil. Twitter can be a bit evil, but don't go away thinking that you should cut all social media out of your life. What you should be doing is switching the way you think of social media. Because whether we like it or not, whether we do it consciously or not, social media does condition us to have this false sense of reality that everyone else is having a great time and is succeeding and is getting all the projects we want apart from us. And that is purely because social media is a curated platform. People are putting only what they want to show on there. But because we're oversaturated in it, because we see it an awful lot, we start to believe that it is a demonstration of reality, of how real people are experiencing their lives, when that's just not true. Behind every good drawing that I post on Instagram, there's 10 awful ones that I'm not going to show anyone. And that's the case for everybody on social media. Every holiday that they post about, every drawing that they post, every success, everything that they have that they want to show off and shout about on social media, there's loads of other things that they'd rather keep hush. So bear in mind that you are not the only person experiencing lulls, experiencing worry, having a bit of an art block, not being able to do the things you want to do, just because everyone else on social media seems to be okay. They have the same things, the same worries, the same lulls as you. Another area that can help imposter syndrome grow quite a bit is something that we're all experiencing to some degree or another at the moment, and that is isolation. But isolation doesn't need to mean physical isolation, because yes, some of us have to be that way right now. But it's rather isolation from communication, from any sort of communicating with people. If we isolate ourselves completely from communicating with other human beings, then those feelings of I'm the only one experiencing this get bigger and bigger and bigger, because we don't have any other external context telling us otherwise. The next one is quite a big one, and one that's a bit harder to tackle at the core, but individually we can start to unlearn these things. And it is overworking and feeling the pressure to be working constantly. This is, again, particularly prevalent in freelancers, in self-employed people, in people who are building a business or a career themselves from the ground up, because when we stop working, the work stops. No one else picks up the slack. No one else can do it for us. So we feel the need to be working 24/7. And this rhetoric is pushed by so many different elements in us, just in society, around us all the time. Sometimes with us realizing, other times without us realizing. In particular, yeah, I'm going to throw some shade at Fiverr because I have beef with Fiverr. It's a terrible, toxic platform. They pushed adverts like this. This is a legitimate advert that Fiverr put out there. Just read it. Just experience how horribly toxic this is. You eat coffee for lunch. Sleep deprivation is your drug of choice. Like, that's so unhealthy. But that is the rhetoric that's being pushed onto creative people, freelancers, problem solvers. Anyone who feels that doing more work results in more reward. This thing gets pushed on us constantly. We feel the need to be monetizing everything that we do, being sleep deprived all the time, staying up at every hour of the night, pulling all-nighters. I remember that being glamorized so much when I was at university. These sorts of things are so toxic for people who are trying to work healthily. And that should be all of us. We should all be trying to work healthily. But things like Fiverr and some mysterious, unnamed, invisible force is also making us feel like we have to monetize everything and work our fingers to the bone and be constantly tired and pumping money into the economy and ourselves. I wonder what it could be. Next is looking at who experiences it. And this can be answered pretty quickly, but I will go into a little bit more detail. Short answer for who experiences it, literally everyone. Like, everybody. Longer answer, it's everybody, including incredible, respected, unbelievable people. Like, I mean, Maya Angelou experienced it. She even said herself in this quote, "I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find me out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're gonna find me out." That's the key part. Gonna get found out. That's someone who's doing something wrong. That's someone who's an imposter. That feeling is imposter syndrome. That's exactly what she was describing there. And it is a problem for everybody purely because your intellect, your hard work, and the achievements that you have are not a cure or a vaccine for imposter syndrome. This is not just for people who are working their way up the ladder. This is not just for beginners. This is for everybody. I know it sounds really wonderful and heartwarming. It's for everyone, but it's not a nice thing. But yeah, just to put it simply, you cannot vaccinate against imposter syndrome by working more, by doing more, by constantly learning more. That doesn't solve it. And I know that sounds hopeless. I know that sounds like I'm taking away the solutions, but really what it is it's telling you you are not the problem. In terms of imposter syndrome and these feelings that you're having, it is not your fault. You are not experiencing this because you've stopped working hard or because you're not doing enough. Imposter syndrome is not based on reality. It is not based on actual things that are happening. So if it is this illogical and this irrational, what sort of things can we start doing to help shut it down when it starts rearing its head? First thing I can think of is trying to treat ourselves more like students. So we put a lot of expectations on ourselves, and society does as well, to have learned everything, to be fully aware of every little corner and niche of our industry and our practice all the time. There's a lot of shaming, there's a lot of expectations, there's a lot of judging, especially online, of people who are in a field and don't know every single aspect of that field. That's not realistic. No one can know that. No one goes into a profession or a practice knowing every element of it. And anyone who tries to indicate that they do, they don't. That's just not possible. So we have to start treating ourselves and others as learning, not having to have learned everything by now, because that's just more pressure. And imposter syndrome loves when we're under pressure. And the second we start to break down this information and knowledge and wisdom that we should have in our field or our practice, the second it becomes more manageable and less of this giant weight of expectation on top of us. The next thing we can start doing is communicating honestly with the people who are in our circles, in our friendship groups, in the same career as us. People that we trust. This isn't necessarily with everyone, but people that you trust. Try to communicate candidly and honestly about your anxieties, about your worries, about the things that you're having a little bit of a problem with at the moment. Talk to them about it, because you will be so surprised and get this wonderful feeling of solidarity when you realize quite how many of them experience the exact same thing. Because I remember the first time I spoke really openly with someone I had so much respect for, like someone who I thought could do no wrong, and they were way ahead of me and they knew exactly what they were doing and their career was incredible. I was really honest with her, another illustrator, about my worries and my anxieties and the problems I'm having with my work, and she had the exact same feelings. And I know it's obviously not nice to know that someone's having a difficult time as well, but the second you can start to wear down that feeling of, I'm the only one experiencing this, I am the imposter, I am the one that's pretending to be an illustrator, pretending to be a designer, then you will start to feel the imposter syndrome wear away a little bit more, because you're no longer trying to impose, you're no longer pretending, because you'll realize how many people are in the same boat as you. Another thing to bear in mind is trying to unlearn toxic habits and verbalizations and ways that we view certain things in and around our practice. First thing for me would be when I would look at my work, I would think, oh, my work is nothing like theirs. Like, I look at these gorgeous illustrators and these amazing artists and think, my work is nothing like theirs. How can it ever fit in there? Whereas in reality, switching, keeping those same words, but switching the focus to, yeah, my work's nothing like theirs. It'll fill this gap. It'll stand out. People will notice it. So by making that switch, by realizing and acknowledging the value that our differences have in terms of our work and ourselves, we will start to feel much more positive when our work doesn't line up exactly with someone else's. Because the differences is what makes our work stand out, especially for creative people. If your work looks exactly like somebody else's, why would you get hired? They just hire the original artist. So the more we can stand out, the more distinctive and brave we can be about our differences, the more significant our successes will be. They won't be slow little increments, they will be bigger leaps. But it takes us switching that value, that verbalization, the way we view our differences, in order to get comfortable with that and in order to put our work out there bravely, happy that it's different from everybody else's work. So continuing on with unlearning things and switching the way we view things and verbalize things is back to sketchbooks. So now when I look at these sways of beautiful, beautiful artworks, these wonderful books, these stunning, well-curated, aesthetically pleasing, composed beautifully books, I no longer view them as sketchbooks. They are instead, in my head, art books. This instantly takes the pressure and the imposter syndrome element away from when I use a sketchbook, because I'm not trying to recreate an art book. That's not what I'm trying to do. So I can't be an imposter if the thing I'm trying to do is completely different to the thing I'm looking at. That's the problem, is to some degree solved now that I no longer have the pressure to make my sketchbook look like an art book. In a similar way, taking pressure off, again, is buying cheap sketchbooks. Like, I used to love buying gorgeous, expensive, stunning sketchbooks because they'd look amazing, and if I could make them look like an art book, mwah, perfect for Instagram. But the second I started buying cheap ones, like cheap, staple-bound exercise books with nasty paper in, the best work started coming out because I felt way less pressure. I felt much more comfortable doodling and allowing ideas to happen and using a sketchbook for what it's supposed to be used for. And that's idea generation and mistakes and mess and working your way through all the mess that is the ideas in your brain to find that little nugget of goodness. That's what sketchbooks should really be used for. And it is fine to make them stunning. It is fine to make them gorgeous and to curate them and to compose them and to plan them. But in my head, personally, when I see them, they are now art books, and that takes the pressure off. I feel it's so much easier now to use them. I don't feel the pressure to post them online all the time, to make them Instagram worthy, to make them Pinterest worthy. They are now just an idea generation zone. So there's nasty sketches in there, there's horrible thumbnails, there's writing a giant swear word across the page because I got really frustrated with it. My sketchbooks aren't pretty anymore. And that's fine, because that's what they're supposed to be, a mess. And that's where my best ideas come from. And if I want to develop that further in an art book, I absolutely can. Everyone has the freedom to use these books however they want. But by taking the pressure away from making your books look perfect, you will find it so much easier to use a sketchbook. So those are some things that I personally do to try and reduce the effect that imposter syndrome has on me. They can help. Sometimes you just have to ride the wave a little bit, because imposter syndrome, like I said, is not an illness. It's an experience. It's something you experience and that will pass, but I'm afraid I don't have a magical cure for you. There isn't a magical cure for it. There's those things that you can do to reduce it, to battle against it, to build up against it, but even though there's not a magic cure, keeping in mind these few things will hopefully help it reduce, will hopefully help things move a lot more organically and comfortably and in a positive direction for you when you feel imposter syndrome creep in. First thing is remembering that intellect is not the cure. Neither is hard work or wisdom or knowledge or any of the other things that mysterious force in society tells us we should be doing more of all the time. Those are not the cure, because the smartest, most capable, most successful people experience it. And again, I know this sounds like I'm ripping hope away, but all I'm saying is that you need to remember it's not your fault that this has crept in. It's not because you didn't work hard enough. It's not because you're not smart enough. Imposter syndrome is not based on reality. The next thing is it is an experience. Like I've said, it's not an illness. It will pass. It's all in waves. It will pass. You will not be in this horrible bubble of imposter syndrome forever. It doesn't stick with people forever. You are not experiencing this on your own. Other people feel the same way you do, even people that you have tons of respect for, people that you think could do no wrong, people that you think are in this dream position that's really high up in their career, that are hyper smart. They experience it too. Next is unlearning those toxic thoughts and habits to the best of our ability. It can be hard to unlearn things that have been ingrained in us for years, thanks to that mysterious force, and thanks to a bunch of other different things that have influenced the way that we start to think and view ourselves and our work. But the more we can strive to unlearn things, like switching sketchbook to artbook when you feel the need to. Another one I do as well is I don't really say talented anymore, because I feel that that takes the success away from the person. Talented seems to insinuate that you're born with this amazing skill and it just happened. So I've tried to replace that with skilled. If someone is really good at something, they are skilled at it because they worked hard at it. I don't know if anyone else experiences this particular frustration, but I get a little bit annoyed in myself when people will say, God, I wish I could draw. I wish I could do this. I wish I had that amazing talent that you have. And I know that it's coming from a good place, them saying this, but I've worked for 20 plus years on this skill and I've done a degree in it and I draw damn near every day. I do my best to hone this skill. It's hard work. So I try to say skilled instead of talented because it puts more success on me and more success on the people who have worked their butts off to get good at what they do. Another thing that you can switch over as well is removing this horrible phrase from your brain. I remember hearing this a lot, especially when I was a student. People trying to say in short that they want me to present professionally. They want their students to present professionally when talking to potential clients, when putting their work online. And they would use this phrase, fake it till you make it. And again, meant with the best of intentions, but it even has the word fake in it. Like, if anything's gonna fuel imposter syndrome, this is gonna be one of them. So strip the word fake straight out of there. And I heard an incredible alternative to this on Twitter ages and ages ago, and it's hone it whilst you own it. That's so much cooler. And it reminds us that we are honing our skill. We are not faking anything. Just because we're not at the very top, just because we haven't learned everything, just because we struggle sometimes, doesn't mean we're faking it. We are honing our skill. We are learning. Remember, not having learned everything, we are learning whilst we own it, whilst we're fully aware that we're good at this and we're getting there and we're professionals. So hone it whilst you own it is so much better than fake it till you make it. So that's what I've got for you today. I really hope some of that was useful or helpful or a sense of solidarity or whatever it is that you got from it today. Thank you ever so much for watching right to the end, you trooper. And I wish you the best of luck with everything that you do. If you do these things, those 4 things I mentioned at the end, and try to remember that it's not your fault that imposter syndrome crept in, but there are things you can do to defend against it and to help reduce it when it's there. Hopefully you will feel it slip away a little bit and leave more room for your creative, amazing brain to do what it wants to do. So thank you again and have a great rest of your day. Bye.